Well, protests are expected this weekend in Colombia as many in the community continue to demand justice for 14-year-old Cyrus Carmack-Belton. Monday's not guilty verdict for Rick Chow, who shot and killed Cyrus in 2023, has triggered strong reactions here in South Carolina and across the country. And joining us now to discuss what comes next for the Carmack-Belton family is their attorney and South Carolina House Minority Leader, Todd Rutherford. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I want to start with this. We are now just a few days from the verdict. How is Cyrus's family holding up?
They continue to be devastated by it, but not just them, the entire community. In fact, people all across the globe are just at a loss for how they could find him not guilty. And they're trying to figure out why the value of human life is so little when it comes to black children, because seemingly that is the only answer here.
When that verdict came down, were you surprised? Was the family surprised?
Surprise is an understatement. I actually was sitting outside and I was listening to it on my phone. I threw my phone down and my first call was to the sheriff, and I've known the sheriff for 30 years, and when I called him, we both were just dismayed, could not believe it. Have watched trials, had been in trials, and never seen anything like it, and could see no reason why they could find him not guilty.
So you have been so vocal about this, really advocating on behalf of the family, and you've been talking about the fact that you have 30 years of experience as a lawyer. Do you think anything went wrong during the trial that could have led to this verdict?
So I think that obviously something went wrong. I'm just not sure what it was. I didn't get a chance to talk to the jurors afterwards, but it looks like one of those scenarios where if you had two black men chasing a young blonde girl out of a convenience store and they chased her for 130 yards and shot her in the back, they'd be on death row. I mean, that's the distinction here and the difference that everyone notices, and it's hard to articulate. And to the rest of the world that doesn't see race or that doesn't think race matters or that racism doesn't exist, keeping the methodology going of saying you have to understand one step at a time, and we still have not reached the point where some people consider us humans.
When you are talking with the family and talking about what is next, one of the things that we've learned is that there will be a civil lawsuit that is going to be filed. What does that process look like from a legal perspective?
So we filed a lawsuit almost immediately, a long time ago, because we saw that this was an injustice. We know that shopkeepers are allowed to protect what they have inside their store. What they're not allowed to do is to chase people 130 yards who have done absolutely nothing wrong. We saw immediately that night that this was a gross injustice. I talked to the witnesses that said that when he came out of the store, he had fear in his eyes. Why should anyone going to shop in a store who doesn't buy anything and doesn't steal anything have that kind of fear? How did the Chows get it so wrong? And I say the Chows, not just Mr. Chow, but his son Andy and his wife as well, because all of them were involved in what happened that night, and all of them are going to have to pay.
So when we think about that night, so many people have, like we said, had strong reactions. There has been a lot of community protests that has happened. Have you been surprised by the community reaction, or did you think, you know what, this is a not guilty verdict and people are going to have something to say?
That honestly didn't surprise me. What has surprised me is the vitriol on the other side. The number of persons that call my office and say mean and hateful things, the number of people that call my clients, a father who lost a child, a mother who lost a child, and tell them they wish their child is burning in hell. The things that people say are just surprising and shocking to me. As you said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been in politics when the Confederate flag was on the top of the dome. I didn't get those kind of calls then. Why this jury verdict gets that kind of reaction out of the hateful, mean, evil, racist that inspire them to not only think those thoughts, but to actually call my office and say those things, to look up the family's phone number and call them and say those things. I don't know. I did not anticipate that.
And I'll say this too. So I was able to speak with one of the witnesses who testified in court, and your experience, the family's experience, is similar to her experience. She has completely had to get off of social media because she has received so much harassment and hate online. And it's something that has been very surprising because, again, I knew that there were going to be strong reactions, but I was not expecting the hate that so many people involved in this case are having to deal with. How is the family handling that?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult. And it's again, you're talking about a witness who simply was driving by and saw a crime and got on the witness stand and reported the exact same thing that she told me that night, that he was so afraid that he ran out of his shoe, that he was running so fast he almost got hit by a car and never bothered to stop. Those people that think that he is some thug should come out to that scene and watch how far an innocent child, because he's a 14-year-old child, nowhere in the world is a 14-year-old an adult, how far an innocent child, because he'd done nothing wrong, so he's innocent, how far he ran from the door of that store all the way down to the spot where he lay in rest. And they should ask themselves, how would a 58-year-old man follow him that far and still have the wind in his body to say, drop the gun? How would a child running that far, falling across the curb, have to have the presence of mind when all the witnesses said he had nothing in his hand to all of a sudden grab a gun that would have either been on the ground or in a book bag and pick it up and point it at somebody? It's a farce. It's a lie. He was a child. He was shot in the back, and he is now dead. And the parents should be allowed to mourn without racists calling him and saying mean things.
Yeah, they should absolutely be allowed to mourn. I want to talk about the protests that are scheduled for tomorrow. There is one protest that is going to be happening at the State House, another at the scene of the shooting. What do you want to tell people who will be taking part in that protest? Because your message from the very beginning, since the not guilty verdict, has been calm and peace.
You know, it's one of those things where even calling it a protest is somewhat strange to me because I've been involved in politics and been involved in all this for so long. This is more of a vigil, of a coming together so that people can ask repeatedly, which is what this, how does this happen? What happened? What went wrong? And let me address, not only have I been doing this for 30 years, I started off prosecuting in that very same office. I watched the trial from beginning to end. Byron is a seasoned prosecutor. Dale Scott is a seasoned prosecutor. These people put their lives into this, and they are devastated as well. And so even the thoughts of, well, it should have been a voluntary manslaughter. This was a child who got shot in the back. It was a murder. It was a murder. And it was not that we need to start off with black children saying, well, because he's black, let's just start off at voluntary manslaughter. Let's put that on the table. This was a murder. That's why they tried it that way, and that's the result that they got, and it's unfortunate. But all of the armchair quarterbacks and the Monday morning people going in and going, well, what mistake was made? We need to fire this person. We need to fire that person. No, we need to recognize that across the globe, black children are considered less than. You're seeing it now in Texas, in the case in Texas, and now this is that same reaction coming to the forefront. It's a Richland County jury, a majority black jury, who saw the same thing.
One of the things that I've also been seeing online is a lot of people comparing this case with Trayvon Martin. Have you seen the similarities in that? Do you believe that this is another similar situation?
It is extremely, strikingly similar, because had Cyrus turned around, if he actually did have a gun in his hand, which none of the witnesses said he did, if he actually did have a gun and he turned around and he shot them for chasing him 130 yards, he would have been justified under the law, but probably charged anyway. However, the law says that he had the right to react to the presence of fear that he was feeling and that the witnesses testified that he had, strikingly like Trayvon Martin.
I want to go back to those protests that will be held this weekend. What is your hope that, or how do you hope this ends? How do you hope the protests go? Because I really want to speak to the peace and the calm.
You know, we have requested, the family has requested peace and calm from the very beginning, and we've gotten it. People are not going out there and tearing things up because I think they're just heartbroken. They're looking at this child and seeing what other people and going, how does this happen? How could this happen to a child in this community? And so it's almost, I keep talking real loud when I do it, because if I don't, I get emotional about it. Well, from the very beginning, I saw it and I went, God, it looks like my son. I don't know how to deal with it. And I think most people don't know how to deal with it. And so that's what, and so we ask for calm, we ask for peace, we ask people to come out and let's talk about how to elevate black life so that we are equal. We're not trying to be elevated over other people's children, just elevate our children so that they are on a firm ground, just like everybody else's child.
And all of the vigils, all of the protests that we've seen, it's so important to note they have all been so peaceful, such good dialogue, people out there mourning, comforting the family, comforting each other. And so that's what we hope to see again this weekend. How do we move forward? What is next? Because this is a conversation that I believe that we are going to continue to have.
We will unfortunately have to continue to have it, and we're going to unfortunately have to keep educating our children as to how to avoid these perils and not find themselves in situations like this. I don't know. I don't have the answers. And I've talked about potential legislation with other members that have called me and said, hey, how can we address this? How can we fix this? I don't have the answers. And I know that unfortunately there's not an answer to every problem, but we've got to keep talking. We've got to keep talking about it. We've got to keep it on the forefront. We've got to lift this family up in prayer and make sure that they understand that the community's with them.
Absolutely. Again, our hearts and prayers go out to every single person who has been affected by this. It doesn't matter what side of this you are on, a 14-year-old has lost their life. And so continuing to pray for that family. Now, we are going to put this interview on our website. That's WLTX.com.